Hello, my friends. I am Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And I produce this information, sometimes in a blog, sometimes in a video, for you to get some information about very important subjects. I am a doctor, and unfortunately, I see sick people. When you're most vulnerable, when you are suffering, or you're spending an arm and a leg to meet the medical expenses, etc. And it brings me a lot of dissatisfaction and sadness to see people when they are sick. And one way or the other, we cannot make a mistake. Something that's unequivocally true is that what we put in our mouths will have a consequence in our life. So we have to be very careful. And by that, I don't mean you have to become vegan or this or the other. No, because food was given to us to enjoy. And if you read Genesis, it begins saying that God told humans that he gave them these plants, these fruits, these animals on earth, these other animals in the ocean, for your enjoyment, for your nutrition. That is the number one clue, the most important fact that you have to have in mind every time you sit at the table. Why am I eating? And we're not eating because we want to have a calorie feast, or get drunk, or get away from a healthy lifestyle. Because if we do that, if we just want a calorie feast, if we just want to get drunk, if we want to smoke a cigar with a cognac and so on, then you're going to be sick. That is no question about it. It's absolutely interconnected. And I'm going to talk about one particular type of food that we all love, that has made mankind what mankind is, has been a major contributor to the success of mankind in this world. I'm going to talk about bread. Why do I want to talk about bread? I mean, this is not a cooking lesson. We're not going to talk about restaurants or anything like that. But I'm talking about it because the number of cases of people that cannot eat gluten is creating a health issue around us. I think it's very easy to talk to friends at church or work or neighbors and ask them, do you know anybody that has gluten intolerance, that has what is called in Europe celiac disease? Well, you're going to find people. But if you go back, those of you that can go back, let's say 50 years in their heads, and review the facts, we didn't even talk about it. We never mentioned it. All of a sudden they tell you, no, I cannot eat bread, I cannot eat pasta, I cannot eat this, because I'm gluten intolerant. What happened? Let's go back. Let's go back thousands of years. One of the reasons why mankind decided to leave behind nomadic life was because they had to take care of their crops. They saw that if they collected certain grains and put them in the soil, they would give a plant with more of the same grains. And those grains were good for you to eat, and they deliver everything we needed, and they become so precious that they couldn't go far away and come back, because by the time they come back, animals or other people might have taken over their crop. So that might be one of the reasons. There are many researchers that say that also beer contributed to the fact, because you can produce both things from these grains. You can produce bread, but you can also produce alcoholic beverage. Because what happens, let me go. With this very simple but very important fact. What probably happened is that they got some of these grains, they got some water, could have been from rain, I don't know, and then the bacteria that are in the atmosphere just around us all the time dropped in that situation, in that wheat broth, if you want to call it that way. And they started eating part of that richness of foods that wheat is. But these bacteria, they can eat the carbohydrates, they can eat the gluten, but in their transformation effort, same like us, when we digest food, they end up producing some waste material. And that waste material that they produce a lot is carbon dioxide. It's a gas. So if you leave it in the wheat concoction and you just let it alone for some time, it's going to create bubbles. Those bubbles are the carbon dioxide that the bacteria are expelling. But when you put it in a dough, when you put it in the wheat with water, something also happens. The protein in the grain is going to turn into a very elastic, very malleable substance where the bubbles of gas get trapped. And if you open a piece of bread, you're going to see that it is not solid. It has a huge number of tiny little holes or spaces filled with that gas, with carbon dioxide. So the two factors contributed to the discovery of bread. And they saw that it was good, and probably sometime they started putting it in a fire and cooking it, and there is where the whole bread story began. We were very fortunate because wheat is a very complex product. It has a lot of carbohydrates, but it has a lot of protein, and it also contains a lot of fiber. What happens with the protein in the wheat is that it is basically in few compounds that give origin to the gluten. And then we can eat it, we can digest it, we can do very well, because we have more bacteria in the gut. So you take a piece of bread, you eat it, it has been already fermented, but of course when you put it in the oven, you kill those bacteria, so the fermentation stops. Then you eat it, then it gets back to your gut, and in your gut, the bacteria, the intestinal flora, are going to further change all those substances. That protein does everything, and then you have the miracle of life. Then you have energy, you have building blocks to heal, to grow, to succeed. So that is really what it is all about. And it's the simplest cooking class that I can give you. Because it only has basically two ingredients: water and wheat. But when we put the yeast, this dough is going to become fluffy and beautiful and lovely, whatever. We all have pulled apart a piece of bread, and the smell and everything goes right into the deepest part of our brain. Because a lot of the good things that have happened to mankind throughout the centuries can be inherited. So we inherit a love for bread. It's part of our life. And the other thing that we're going to add is salt. But that's just for flavor. It's not a major component of bread. Bread is simply wheat and water, yeast to ferment, and salt for taste. So where did what happened with us? Where did we go wrong? Why all of a sudden people tell you, you shouldn't eat that much bread, you shouldn't eat that much wheat, because it's not good for you. This brings me back to the times where I started reading that you shouldn't eat eggs because they were unhealthy. You would only have to eat the white of the bread because the other one was fat. It raised your cholesterol, etc. But after research and years, etc., we discovered that eggs are good. The problem are the eggs that we buy at the market, the cheapest eggs, because the hen has the wrong diet, lives in a cage, so produces low quality eggs. So the problem was not the egg, it's how we produced it. You can say the same about bread. The problem is not bread. The problem is, what have we done to bread? A very good friend of mine who worked all her life in alternative medicine, she was always saying that we should eat food just as it is, not necessarily raw, but the less you do to food, the better off you're going to be. Because every time somebody decides that you can make it sweeter or bigger or more attractive, etc., you're going to be much better off because you're going to sell more of these products. So we have added a lot of sugar for a bread that used to be very good and simple. We have added a lot of things, and we have produced several big mistakes in bread making. So let's analyze what factors have ruined a perfect food and turn it into a villain, and how we can control all these things in order to get a much better profit from the bread that we have around us. And once again, by choosing ingredients, by choosing where you buy your products, by spending a little bit of time examining what the food I'm about to eat comes from and how it was prepared, it's going to take you a long way. A long way, because you're going to live a life long and healthy. So don't go anyway. Let's continue talking about this. My friends, I'm Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And in this podcast, we're talking about food. We're talking about food preparation. And we're talking about the simplest recipe you can ever do. Make bread. Making bread is a very easy recipe because ingredients are only 4. And actually, only 2 of them have to do with the actual bread making, which is flour and water. Then we said that we're going to add yeast to make the dough rise and be fluffy, because the bacteria in yeast produce carbon dioxide and produce these tiny little pockets inside the bread that make it so delicious, so soft, so everything. And lastly, salt, and we do it for taste. Definitely, if you had it without any salt, it's not really good. But one of the problems that we're facing today is that a lot of people that I'm looking in around me, or patients that call me, or patients that come to the hospital, they tell me they cannot eat bread, they cannot eat any wheat product because they have a problem with gluten. And that gluten protein is supposedly harmful. So every time they eat wheat and they eat this gluten, they're going to start with cramps, with pain, with inflammation in their tummy, etc., because the body cannot handle it. So we have been examining that probably some factors are very important, and we're doing a terrible mistake by pointing out to bread as the culprit, where we should start looking somewhere else. And to me, one of the first reasons why bread has become a bad food is because we don't use fermentation anymore. It used to be that a bread maker would get up at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, prepare the dough, and let it rise. What is that? Let the bacteria in the flour do their job. And what is their job? Their job is, this is wheat for you. Help yourselves. Take as much as you want. And of course, those bacteria in this mixture of flour and water, well, they are in Disneyland. They're very happy. So they're eating, getting fat, being very happy, etc., etc. But in the process, by digesting some of the carbohydrate and by digesting part of the gluten, they produce a gas, which is carbon monoxide, which creates the little pockets in the bread. When you knead the dough, if you have ever done it, you're going to see that you start with a very loose flour, and as you work on it, as you knead it, all of a sudden it starts getting together, and at the end you're going to have a very elastic, a very malleable dough, where the bacteria are going to put those little pockets, because when they release the gas, the gluten that has been developed by kneading, it's going to trap that gas and create the little pockets. We have to say that gluten is one of the many, many, many proteins wheat has. Wheat is a great food. We just have to treat it right. So when you let the bacteria work on it, they're actually enjoying the gluten that will not go to your tummy afterwards. So I was saying that the bread maker got at 4 o'clock in the morning, made the dough, put the yeast, let it to rise, and then 6 o'clock in the morning, 4 hours after, he would start making the bread and then putting it in the oven. And then you had a good hearty bread. What do you do today? Number one, we're becoming slaves of time and comfort. So why do I have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to knead and to let to ferment when I can add a chemical rising formula like baking powder? What happens is baking powder with heat is going to produce also a gas, and that's going to make the bread again soft and fluffy. The difference is that once I get my chemical raising formula, I don't have to wait. I do the bread and put it in the oven, and I'm going to have it in no time. Having to work with bread for long hours and with a lot of care, of course, is more expensive because you have to pay people to do that. So the bread we're eating today is just an effect of somebody trying to save money and deliver something that looks okay, actually a lot of bread looks just fantastic, just as if it had been fermented. But in the chemistry of that bread, you are left alone with whatever amount of of gluten it might have had. So that has been one of the major problems. Bread making and wheat processing has abandoned the traditional ways of making it because of the sake of time, profitability, etc. So we have to make sure that we go to artisan bread, and you go and visit the place, and you make sure they're raising it. One of the good things that I have seen lately is that good, I could say, boutique bread making places are appearing and appearing and appearing in America. That's very good news, because that bread is going to have a lot less gluten. So you can have your cake and eat it too. You're going to have your bread, but you will not have the amount of gluten that you had. What else has happened? Well, back in the 1970s, late 60s, there was a man that was looking at shortages of food all around the world, and he was working on the genetics of wheat. And he developed a wheat that was very short. The plant was very short. Instead of being this tall, it would be just 1.5 feet tall. So that thing, when he produced these seeds, became what it was called at that time the Green Revolution. Not only that, this man was awarded the Peace Nobel Prize, because everybody thought, if I have 2 acres of wheat, and instead of getting 1 ton of grain, I'm going to obtain 6. Wow! I love this man. We have one problem. Genetically modified wheat has higher gluten. Don't ask me why. But if we cannot get an honest flour maker, we're going to have a lot of bread, a lot of gluten. So what we have to do is ferment it longer. There's a piece of bread that I love, you probably know it very well, that it's focaccia. Focaccia is an Italian bread that ferments for days. They measure fermentation in days. 3 days, 5 days. That's what you get. For example, San Francisco sourdough, it's famous because of its quality of bread making and its yeast, the different species of yeast that they use. So if you're going to have wheat, make sure you know where it's coming from. Make sure bread making has been fermented. And the other thing is, let's eat less. But I could tell you that about everything. We need less meat in our diet. We need less bread in our diet. We need less carbohydrates. But you have to think very well. When I say be more frugal with your food, I mean eat well, smaller amounts. Japanese say that you have to fill 80% of your tummy when you eat. Never full. And we all have lived with the experience. You have food and you say, oh, this was great, it was delicious, thank God I had this food. But then somebody says, you want a second serving? And we jump immediately and say yes, when we should have said no. Because I love this food, and I want this food to be usable and profitable for my body. If I have another serving, I'm going to make a disservice to my body. So I could tell you that fermented bread has lower amount of gluten, so you're going to be able to enjoy the food you love without any consequence. And also, that food, it's going to have to be reduced in the amounts. Let's just be sensible. If you just take your cell phone and look at requirements of protein and energy and calories and vitamins, etc., you're going to find a lot of information. So make sure that you bring this into your life so you can enjoy life, have a beautiful barbecue on 4th of July, but don't hurt yourself. In other words, be responsible with your body because it has been entrusted to you. You are the guardian of that body that you have control of. So you have to say, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to reduce. And by doing that, you're going to see that everything starts working better and better. And something that you will not believe is, because you say, what's the connection? But there's a big connection. If you exercise more, if you walk around, if you move yourself, wheat digestion is going to be more thorough and with much lower consequences. You're going to be in good shape. You're going to love what you're doing. So don't go anywhere, because we're going to talk about what does gluten do to people? Why I want it out of my life. Let's talk about that. My dear friends, you are with Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. Today, I thought, why don't we talk about something that we always mention? We say our daily bread. Why do I say that? Because really, if you think of that phrase, it implies so many things. It implies our growing up, our building a good body, creating a good immune system, everything. We need our bread because we need that energy. But we were talking about the gluten that from being a blessing, now it is a problem, supposedly. Why I say supposedly? Because it's not gluten in itself the problem, but how we handle it. I have already mentioned that if you use chemical substances to raise the dough, you're stuck with whatever the wheat already has. You're stuck with your gluten, you're stuck with everything. When you put these bacteria in conjunction with your bread, with your dough, then carbohydrates and gluten are going to diminish because the bacteria has to live. And she takes these compounds and produces carbon dioxide that gives you the little pockets in the bread. So it's a great combination. When you use chemical erasers, what's going to happen is that powder under the heat of the oven is going to release a gas, but it wasn't fermented. It doesn't affect the content of carbohydrates and does not affect gluten at all. So we have to choose better our breads. We have to make sure it has been fermented. If it's wholesome, a lot better. Because another problem of the wheat today is that we take away the husk of the grain. We just take the grain. And the grain has protein and vitamins and minerals and a lot of good things, but it doesn't have fiber. And we need the fiber. It's absolutely crucial that we take that flour. That's why at BioCare Hospital, when we prepare our bread, because all our bread at BioCare Hospital is done in-house. Everything, a cookie, a birthday cake, everything. And we choose the ingredients. And when we get unbleached, good quality flour. And I'm going to give you a tip that can make your bread even more nutritional. Use a little bit of barley flour. When you're making bread, about 10% of your flour content should come from barley. Why? Because contrary to wheat, in wheat you have the grain and you have all the fiber around it. So when you refine the wheat, you make away with the chromium, which is the mineral that the body needs to handle carbohydrates. We throw it to the garbage can, and it has the fiber that's going to let your intestinal tract be in good health. So you're just with your grain, with protein and vitamins, etc. That's it. But barley has the fiber into the grain. There's no way you can separate fiber from the grain. So if you add 10% of barley flour to your bread making, you're going to be in much better shape, much better bread. You can make combinations with anything we mentioned. We were mentioning that the new types of wheat have a higher content of gluten. The other important part is that we eat more. Period. We're living in this terrible situation where nobody seems to mind if we eat a lot or not. And that can become unhealthy just by the quantities. A good example, you take so much sugar, it gives you energy. But if you go way up with sugar, you create a problem because that sugar is going to create chronic inflammation. Same with gluten. If we eat certain amounts of gluten, the body can handle it. But if we eat a lot, then we start creating a problem. And the problem is that with all this gluten arriving to the intestinal wall is going to produce inflammation. Excess sugar, excess protein, excess everything produces inflammation as a response. Why? Because the body doesn't know how to handle it. So you have to make sure that you want the quality of your food preparation. And I repeat, there are many places across the United States where you can go and buy honest, great bread. So do that. So the inflammation that comes with all that gluten goes to your intestinal tract. And when the cells in the intestinal flora and the cells in the intestinal wall do not get the perfect conditions, they start to reduce in size and create passages for food, for things to get into your bloodstream. The villi of the colon or of the bowel are stuck one to the next. So food goes through here, but nothing touches your bloodstream. If you let those villi to be reduced in size because they don't have enough energy, they don't have enough nutrition, then these stuck things are going to open up because they're becoming thinner, shorter. So the ability of food products to touch your blood increases a lot. And that brings more inflammation. And that inflammation creates pain. Remember, any inflammation is going to produce pain. You have pain, you have abnormal gases, you have abnormal flora, you're going to be changing your flora, and that is a big problem. And people that are listening that have gluten intolerance know about it. And you tell them, but this bread is very good. And you say, no, but I eat it and then I get bloated, I have pain, I have diarrhea, I have all sorts of symptoms. If you share that part of the story, give me a call, because it's a warning. It's the beginning of more serious conditions. Give me a call, send me an email. It's going to cost you nothing. I'm not charging you anything. But let's review what you're doing. If you're gluten intolerant, you have to know your tricks to come out of it. Because if not, you might end up in the surgical room where they're going to remove the most affected part of your intestine. Or worse, end up with a colostomy because your bowels are so hurt, so damaged, that there's no way you can bring it back, health back to them. So this inflammation is going to reduce the capacity and the quality of the intestinal wall. And everything that goes across your bowel can enter your blood, and many people get like shivering, and they even get fever because they have a strong immune response against those compounds that should not be there in the first place. And sometimes it starts to bleed. And as these parts of the tissue die, they're going to leave areas without any lining that we call ulcers. And then just follow the words: chronic, inflammatory, ulcerative colitis. You have the perfect storm. Just by eating bad bread. So this is what I'm talking about all the time. If you educate yourself, if you know more about these things, if you go more to the root of the problem, because it's easy to take a pill and the pain is going to diminish, but you don't want that. You want the problem to go away. And I can assure you that we can change that back to normality. But you don't have to wait. You can start right now if you call me and you tell me what's going on, and let's start working a plan. And yes, you might have to come to the hospital, because we might have to fix your intestinal flora, you might have to fix the inflammatory process in your bowel. I have seen many people that were ready to go for surgery because they didn't find any improvement, that are now very happy and learned their lesson. So don't let that happen to you. This inflammation, I was saying, then is going to create a chronic problem just because the amount of gluten that you're taking. Now, you make away with gluten. I'm not going to take gluten. Is the problem solved? No, it's improved. You might have other problems later on. What can we do? Or what have we do? We have to review our intestinal health, because it is our intestinal health what matters the most. We should eat, digest, take advantage of all the things that come in that food, and be strong and feel better. That's why we're eating, aren't we? Not because, again, forget about comfort. Forget about comfort food. We can teach you to make great food in a smart way. And actually, the web resources right now are enormous. You don't have to go further than your desk, further than your laptop, further than your cell phone, to get a lot of information of how you can recuperate your health. Here, we're talking about healing, not feeling better. We're talking about healing. That's what you want. You want to say, I remember I was once with this problem, but not anymore, because I learned my lesson, I educated myself, and saw what could we do and what couldn't we do. And that is going to be the clue for a long, healthy life. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about how BioCare Hospital sees, understands, and manages these health problems. So stay with me, because we have still a lot of things to talk about. Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. That's who you're talking to. And I love these conversations, and I hope you follow them. I have a lot of conversations like this. You can do the web, you can go to your social platform you love, and look for Dr. Rodriguez, look for a BioCare Hospital, and you're going to find a lot of resources that you can use today, you can begin using today. Because our work is about health maintenance. Medical care is important, but it is a lot more important not to get sick. Because if you think that I can have my fun and then I go to the doctor gives me a prescription, my prescription filled by the pharmacy, etc., 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 you're wrong. You're wrong, because in this time and age, most of the diseases that frighten us are related to our lifestyle. Number one. Number two, the vast majority of them are going to be incurable. Your doctor is going to use a different word. He's going to say, we're going to control it. We're going to put your diabetes under control. We're going to put your high blood pressure under control. We're going to put your arthritis under control. And when you say, for how long do I have to take this medication? He's going to say, for as long as you live. In other words, we are dealing with the problem, but we don't have a final answer. And a lot of that can be helped if we play by the rules, if we are obedient, because actually we have been given all the rules of what we should be doing, but we don't do it. And you probably have that book in your house, and you can learn a lot about good nutrition on a book that was written thousands of years ago. So please make yourself a big favor. Start analyzing your life. Any question, anything you don't know, send me a note. Ask me a question. It's going to cost you nothing. But I'll be very happy to see that you're becoming proactive and that you are committed to maintain your health. That is, to me, the biggest part of everything. Make sure you understand your body. Make sure you know how to deal with it. Make sure you know that probably at the 50s or 60s, I should go to a hospital, to a doctor, to check everything out. Now, that hospital has to be BioCare, because physicians have been trained in such a way that if you go and you say, I'm very healthy, I'm in good shape, but I just want to make sure I continue to be healthy, they're going to turn you out and they're going to say, come back when you're sick. Doctors and hospitals have been created to deal with illness, not with health. BioCare thinks in a very different way. So we're talking about bread making and the problems of gluten. And what I can tell you is that when you see people like that, when we see patients with gluten intolerance, which in many cases can be severe, can be so severe that you don't have any other options than to open up and remove part of your bowel. And in many cases, that removal means you're going to end up with a colostomy for the rest of your life, with a bag on your side. Don't let that happen. Don't get that far. Because believe me, medicine will not be able to solve the problems. But you can do it. You can do it by taking care of yourself. When we get people at the hospital with serious inflammatory colonic disease, well, of course we put them in the hospital. And what I'm going to do is put that bowel at rest. Leave it alone. Don't move it. Let it heal. When you break a bone, what do? We break a bone, we put a cast. Why? Because you don't want the damaged area to move, because it'll never heal. When your bowel is so ruined, you have to stop using it for a few days. So inflammation goes down and restoration begins. But that restoration and that management of inflammation has to be helped by medical intervention. And BioCare Hospital is a full hospital with MDs and registered nurses that understand and love their work. So when I see patients like that, what I do is I put them on full fast, not even water, for a day or two. You will not eat anything. I'm going to give that poor bowel a chance to start coming back. You said, doctor, I cannot go 2 days without drinking or eating. Well, I might be able to do it without eating, but not without water. No, but I have a full hospital. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to one of the blessings of modern medicine. To me, it's one of the biggest blessings of modern medicine, which is parenteral intravenous nutrition. I can put a catheter and I can put in your blood fats, protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals. I can put everything your body needs for a few days. So you're not going to feel bad. All you're going to do is you're going to start feeling how everything starts to calm down, to cool. That's the beginning of your new healthy life. And then we're going to work on your intestinal flora. I'm going to check what you have. Because intestinal flora is not the same with everybody. It is so individual that in Paris there is a bank for all the EU to make sure what sort of bowel bacteria you have. And it's like the fingerprints. It's absolutely individual. So if they catch somebody in Germany, let's say, they send a little sample of poop to Paris, they check it in their files and say, this is this person. Genetically, for example, even if you check the genes, twins that come from the same egg are going to have the same DNA. You cannot tell one apart the other. But when you check this tool, this is one, this is the other. That's how individual it is. So what we're going to do is going to work on that individual intestinal flora you have. We're going to enrich it. And sometimes you have to do bigger things. Bacteria, the intestinal flora, that's why we call flora. Flora relates to the vegetable kingdom. Well, we call it intestinal flora because it is made up particularly of bacteria. And bacteria, they are tiny, small things that are vegetables. They are vegetable cells. So these vegetable cells, if you have this type but not the other, or you have this type just about only, you have a problem. You need it diverse. You need many, because one helps the other. And then you can produce a healthy intestinal flora that's going to allow for your bowel to be well fed, and for all those villi that I have been talking about in the intestinal wall to grow big and beautiful and stick one to the other, so nothing can get across that barrier unless the wisdom of your body decides so. Because the wisdom of the body, as food is going passing through, can say, I need that vitamin K, I need that protein, I need that carbohydrate. It's selective, and the body is going to get what the body needs. How you can block the system? By overwhelming it. I'm going to give you a few examples. If you go and have a calorie feast with ice cream and donuts and cookies, you loaded your body with sugar in one simple serving. That is bad for your body because your body is not prepared to handle that. You go to the restaurant and you order a tomahawk steak, 30 ounces of meat. Your body cannot do it. It's going to be confused, and it's going to have consequences. So, unfortunately, the saying is truth. Too much of a good thing might be a problem. So, be more sensitive about what you're doing. Start planning your things. And if you think you might have some of these symptoms, be aware, be ready, because you might end up in an operating room with a colostomy for the rest of your life. So, you have any questions? Do I have it? Does this count? Does the other count? Don't wonder. Give me a call. I have a toll-free number. give me a call, send me an email, go to the social media of your choice, and tell me what worries you. And I'll be very happy to tell you, why don't we start doing this and this? You might never have to go to a hospital for that reason, because you started making the changes. I know people that when they were told that part of the bowel was going to be removed and probably end up with a colostomy, that came to BioCare Hospital and said, Doctor, I want to give it a try. I don't want, the idea of the surgery and colostomy just doesn't suit me at all. So we start the program, and you can see their smiles. I always say that the best payment you can give it to a doctor, and it's a smile, but not an voluntary smile. I don't want to say, hello, doctor. That I don't want. What I want is when I go by and you say, doctor, how are you doing? And then you see people smiling. Because inflammatory colonic conditions can bring a lot of pain, and you can see it. I have seen many patients, for example, I said, are you bloated? Are you having cramps? Yeah, doctor. I can see it in their faces. And all of us that have had some sort of a problem like that know that's what it is. So BioCare has the experience. BioCare has been successful. BioCare is willing to share success stories with you. Our people rave about our food, our care. So all you have to do is start today. And I'm going to be 100% behind you. Till next time, I'm Dr. Rodriguez, BioCare Hospital.